Hello and welcome to this month's All-Star tutorial. You're watching with Sue Vine from Miss Pink's Craft Spot. This month our tutorials are all featuring the flowers from every season suite. There are multiple stamp sets, DSP, dies and embellishments in the suite. I'm using the Celebrate Sunflowers bundle for my project today. Okie dokie, let's get started. I'm going to stamp these small sunflowers using Seaside Spray. And I'm stamping that on Shimmery Whisper White because that's a little bit more forgiving than normal Whisper White cardstock for watercolouring. I have my new water markers. There are 3 sizes. I'm not using the large one, I'm just using the small and the medium. I'm using Gorgeous Grape as well as Misty Moonlight for my sunflower colours. I like to use a clear block as my palette for my ink when I'm doing watercolouring. Now with the new markers you just need to press them a little bit higher up on the shaft than the old ones, but apart from that they're basically the same. I'm starting by adding the blue to the centre of the sunflower so I can build up my colour a little bit dark in here. I like to rinse off my brush between sections when doing watercolour. So I've gone back and I'm starting back with a really light wash of the Misty Moonlight just around the centre of the flower. Then with a clean block I'm getting my Gorgeous Grape ink to start to put the purple through the flower. I'm doing a really light wash here to begin with, so it's blending a little bit with the blue, but it's giving me that real distinct pale purple around the edge of the flower. Now I'm going back and I'm picking up quite a dark section of the purple ink, as you can see there, and I'm using just the tip, the very tip of the brush. And I'm just working my way around to give a little bit of the detail that displays in the stamp. So I'm using the Seaside Spray ink as a guide. So it's a little bit like invisible ink colouring. And then I'm just picking up blue into the edge of the petals. Now, as my ink dried, the blue went quite light in the middle, so I'm just putting a bit more depth back into the centre of the flower. So repeat that process with the second flower, and then we're on to Just Jade for our leaves. So I'm just flooding in a little bit of the green, and then I'm picking up more of the intense colour and just adding the detail with the tip of the brush, just like I did with the petals. Now as the ink dries it does fade, so if you decide you want a little bit more colour, just go back in and lightly add a little bit more of either your purple or your blue. I'm adding more depth just around the centre of the flower with the misty moonlight. And then just pop that to one side to dry. Now we're on to the really cool part of creating the embossed background. So I've cut out 2 sunflowers and 3 leaves using thick whisper white cardstock, and then we're going to adhere them to the normal whisper white layer. Now I'm using a silicone mat with my Tombow glue, and I have a sponge dauber that I keep in a plastic bag just for glue. By doing it like this, I can get a nice thin layer of the glue onto the die cut without having too much waste, and it doesn't squish out the sides when you push it down on your card base. So just work your way around your card front, and don't worry about the overhanging bits. We're actually going to trim them off, and we're going to use the partial flowers to fill in other parts of the card. So you can see here I've trimmed a bit off, and then I'm just putting that piece of sunflower on the bottom of the card. Just make sure you've got glue around all the edges of the card base, and then you can go ahead and trim off all the excess. Now I'm not using my really good pointy scissors here, I'm just using some older scissors because you can get a little bit of glue on your scissors. So how cool is that effect? I think it's really gorgeous. So now I've die cut my sunflowers, and again the colour isn't quite as intense as I would like, so I've grabbed a Night of Navy Stamp and Blend, and I'm just going to put more detail around the edge of the centre of the flower just like it looks on the stamp. Now we're going to start putting the card together, so we're going to put our embossed base on and then work out where we want to put the sunflowers. At this point I'm thinking maybe I need 3 flowers, but I'm not sure. But first of all I'm going to stamp and punch my sentiment. So I'm stamping with Misty Moonlight. I'm just making sure I'm getting that nice and straight on the cardstock. And I've got it straight, but I haven't centered it, so I'm just going to need to trim a little bit off so that it's going to fit in my punch. This new punch is really cool. You can see it's got the mark lines for 3 different sizes, and you also get 2 different ends. Now if you're not sure where your stamping ends, you turn it over and you can actually see if you're going to stamp off any of your sentiment. I was nowhere near that, and in fact I want to get a lot closer, so I'm just going to use that end bit, mark it with a pencil, cut it off, and then repunch it. And there you go, much better. Now I've got a slightly wider strip. I think this one is 1 inch wide. The other one I trimmed down to 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm just going to layer them on top of each other. Now my strip was a little bit too wide. I did have a bit of a problem putting it in the punch, but I thought it would be okay. But it's not quite right, so I'm just going to trim a little bit off the edge, and then it will line up in the center perfectly. So that's looking much more like I want it. So So I'm just positioning that top flower so it sits in the word bunch. So to stop things moving about now, I'm going to adhere that. I should have done that in the first place. I'm actually lining that flower up in the center of the die cut. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but I did intend to do that. So I'm popping that first flower up on a dimensional so it's easy to slide in the sentiment underneath. And I'm finding that too much of the flower is hiding, so I'm going to cut it in half so I can put some below and some above the sentiment. I'm just using my grid background to make my card straight and line up that sentiment, and I'm just going to pop a dimensional on the edge to hold it in place, and then I can finally position my other sunflowers, which is now 2. So you could actually stamp and colour 3 flowers here if you find that easier, or you can cut them in half like I have. Now that I've got them in place, I'm just going to pop some glue dots underneath them. And then just one more glue dot under the other end of the sentiment, and I'm actually folding my glue dot in half and then quarters, just so it's a little bit thicker and it stands up a bit more, but a dimensional would have been too big there. So I just trim off the excess of the sentiment banner, and that is the front of the card all finished. Except for bling, we have to have bling. So metallic pearls, silver and gold. The silver actually does have a blue tone, I find, so it's perfect for this card. I love that effect of the die embossed for the background. Now for the center of the card, I'm going to stamp a couple of the sunflowers just in Misty Moonlight. And put a little bit of leaf down there as well. Same at the top. And then just adhere that into the side of the card. Now, would you believe it? I never actually adhered that embossed card base. But never fear, we'll just realign it, and then we will pop some multi-purpose glue underneath there. And no one will ever know that I didn't adhere it in the first place. And there you go, there is the finished card. I hope you've enjoyed my tutorial, and I'll see you back again next month. Bye!